This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario.
Hello and welcome to Canada Reads American Style. I'm Tara and I'm here today with a special guest. I have Hollay Ghadery with me. Hello, Hollay.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hollay is an award-winning Iranian-Canadian multi-genre writer living in rural Ontario on Anishinaabe land. Fuse, her acclaimed memoir of mixed-race identity and mental illness, was published by Guernica Editions Mirrorland imprint in 2021 and won the 2023 Canadian Book Club Award for Nonfiction Memoir. I'm going to put a little aside in here. Rebecca and I spoke to Hollay upon the publication of her memoir, so go back into our catalog and you can listen to that interview. Her debut collection of poetry, Rebellion Box, was released with Radiant Press in April 2023. Hollay's short fiction collection, Widow Fantasies, was released by Gordon Hill Press in 2024. Her chapbook, The Leaves of Grass Are Dreaming, was released in November 2025 with Anstruther Press. On February 15th, 2026, her debut novel, The Unravelling of Ou, was published by Palimpsest Press. Hollay is a board member of the League of Canadian Poets, the co-chair of the League's BIPOC committee, as well as the poet laureate of the region in which she lives, and a host on the New Books Network. Hollay is also a host of Howl, the literary arts show, on 89.5 CIUT FM, a member of the Writers Union of Canada, the Creative Nonfiction Collective, and the National Book Critics Circle. Oh my God, that's amazing, Hollay.
That's so much.
It's so much. I love it. It's the best. And then you still have time for this and writing. It's amazing. Welcome.
Thank you. I was just thinking, I gotta cut my bio down.
No, it's Graham reading through. I'm like, I don't know how you do this. And what we're here to speak about today is your debut novel, The Unravelling of Ou. So let's get started. I have my thing. Sorry, my phone closed on me. Let's get started with you telling us about the book, The Unravelling of Ou, its unique narrator, Ecology Paul, and why you chose to write the book from the POV of Ecology Paul.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I can never get tired of talking about Ecology Paul. So,
No.
so for our listeners, Ecology Paul is a sock puppet. And he, they, it, whatever you want to call it. And in the book, I believe Ecology Paul says that they're an ou, which is the Farsi genderless pronoun for he and she, uh, because we don't have an equivalent in English. I often say he, but the truth is, it's an Ecology Paul's an ou. Uh,
Good.
so Ecology Paul belongs to Minoo, or they belong to each other, and the puppet is Minoo's way of making sense of her life and the world around her after she is exiled from Iran at the age of 14 after a teenage pregnancy to Canada, and finding herself at loose ends, not knowing what to do, needing her mother, but being a mother, having a really strained and difficult relationship with her own mother, who is the one who exiles her to Canada. And she is promised that her baby will follow, but the baby never does. Her parents raise the baby as their own. So there's that loss and not knowing how to deal with it. There's also a queer coming of age story in this book too. I was going to say buried in there, but it's not really buried. It's right there. And Minoo not having the words or the emotional acuity or knowledge or support to really talk about the fact that she's not straight.
Mhm.
And Ecology Paul is the conduit through which she is trying to make sense of her world. Or if you're whimsical like me, Ecology Paul is its own entity and is Minoo's best friend. So I leave it open to the reader to interpret that any way that they can. But for me, the puppet seemed like the best way possible to examine the inner workings of someone's mind free from shame and oppression, because historically, of course, puppets have been used to talk about things that are very difficult to talk about.
Mhm.
So it was a very natural choice for me to make. And Ecology Paul, I mean, I dedicated the book to the puppet. So I grew very fond of this character by the end of the book.
Yeah, I did too. After having read the book, I grew very fond of him because I loved how Paul he supported like they were there for Minoo through a lot of trauma in her past life, as well as what's going on in the present, and very supportive of
Hmm.
Minoo,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know?
I would say that Ecology Paul is, my hope for the world, that everyone could be a little bit more supportive of themselves and each other and have more compassion, because while Minu is so deeply, deeply oppressed and so scared and so uncertain, there's obviously this part of her who is very, in the best possible way, playful and childlike, and has tapped
Mhm.
into the ether of the universe and compassion and love,
Yeah.
and is also really intelligent, because Minu is not, she's not someone who's lacking intelligence. She's just lacking the ability to parse out what she feels and to understand what she's feeling on a surface level. But subconsciously, she knows everything, which is why Ecology Paul is so sweet and smart and able to tap into those things, because Mino is, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I love EP, and I think that that silly puppet is like my, again, my hope for everyone, that we could be more compassionate to
Mhm.
ourselves and to each other.
Was there any inspiration for Ecology Paul? Like in your world, or did were they just born in your brain?
I was reading Adele Wiseman's incredible memoir, Old Woman at Play, which is about her mother's prolific doll making, around the time I started this novel. And I keep pointing back to that, because her mother made a lot of dolls just from things she found around the house. So like onion netting, the
Mm.
bags that
Yeah.
onions in them, fish bones, scraps of fabric. Her mother was a seamstress. And the dolls were like very striking, sometimes a little unsettling. You know how like homemade dolls can be a little
Yeah,
bit
they
like,
can be.
yeah, they're like, you see them sometimes, you're like, ah, but really, really beautiful and creative. And I was thinking about the way we use creativity and creation to make sense of our world. So there was that, and because I'm a mother of four, and when this book was being written, my children were even younger than they are now. So we're always up to something craft wise. I've also just always really liked sock puppets. They're just fun and they're an easy craft to make. And some puppets give me kind of the heebie-jeebies, like ventriloquist puppets. Like
Yes.
like oh,
Yes.
those are a bit much for me. But sock puppets are so silly and so absurd and so sweet that I really love them. So at some point, I mean, I don't know when this character, solidified in my head. But at some point, this, soft, squeaky voice started talking and wouldn't shut up. And that turned into Ecology Paul, because when this story started, there was no puppets. There was nothing. I don't remember where it started. I'm sure I have notes somewhere. There was like, it was a story of sisters. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. There was something completely different going on. And then this puppet walked into my head and took the whole stage.
Really? So Minoo, did you have Minoo?
Yeah, me knew in
Yeah.
some incarnation was there
Yeah.
before, but I remember there was a very sister story going on. I know from the beginning I always want to explore the ways in which women uphold the patriarchy, which is something that I'm deeply interested in. I'm interested in dismantling it, unpacking it, putting it out in the light
Yeah.
of day, calling out horrible behaviors. So I knew I wanted to do something about that. So I think just naturally I thought, oh, sisters. Like I've never had a sister, but I do have, like, I gave birth to sisters. I have daughters, and so I was really interested in that. But I don't. It didn't go that way. It's something completely different
Yeah.
happened. And when Ecology Paul walked onto the set, I became enamored with this silly little puppet and pretty obsessed with it. So, I believe as a writer in following your obsessions, no matter how strange they are. It's never occurred to me as a middle aged woman to try to be like anyone else. As a kid, I always tried to be like everybody else. But
Yeah.
the older I've got, the less I'm concerned with that. So I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go wherever my brain takes me, and hopefully it will take me something somewhere interesting. And I think that's a confidence that's developed as
Yeah.
a writer, that I don't have to second guess these creative decisions. I can follow these impulses. And if I think they're working, then they probably are. And if I think they're not working, then they're probably not. So,
Mhm. Yep. So you've mentioned mothers already, Adele Wiseman's mother, and I'm going to quote from your book because I love these two lines. Mothers are God's first true loves.
mhm.
Let's discuss the complexities of the mother-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
That's a big
So,
question. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I love big questions. So I'm gonna start by acknowledging that people are gonna have different reactions to that sentence depending on their relationships with
Mhm.
their mothers. Uh, some people, their mothers aren't their first true loves. Sometimes people have very fraught relationships with their parents. But I would say that most mothers feel the burden to be that, to be that, kind of godlike, all
Yeah.
knowing, all seeing, perfect creature. So while it seems like such a lovely thing to be your child's first true love, there's also like a huge burden with,
Yeah.
with this. So it's a sentence that can be seen from the child's perspective, but it's also acknowledging the impossible pressure put upon mothers to be something perfect. And Minoo's mother is not perfect. Minoo's mother is in some cases absolutely reprehensible,
Mhm.
but I have a lot of sympathy for her. And
Mhm.
Minoo is not perfect, and that's fine, but she has a lot of pressure put on her internally, and even her daughter puts some pressure on her too,
Yeah. Yeah.
rightfully so, maybe. So it's an acknowledgement of this cycle where mothers are constantly failing, often because they have impossible expectations to live up to, and also mothers, they're failing like because their children have that pressure on them, and they actually are failing too. Like sometimes they're just not doing their best. And these are two mothers who absolutely aren't. So I'm trying to acknowledge the humanity and complexity of the situation, and that part of what is making it impossible for us to see our parents or mothers specifically as just humans is the patriarchy and these systems of oppression that deny us as women, or let's just take gender out of it, as mothering people,
Yep.
denies us our sexuality, uh, our flaws and our failures, and denies us compassion. But we're supposed to be these sources of compassion. So I was really interested in taking that apart, dismantling it kind of like a car engine, and seeing
Mhm.
what makes it tick, and getting kind of muddy with it. So that's what I did. Is like, I know that a lot of people don't like Minoo's mother, but I actually I feel very deeply for Minoo's mother.
Yeah. She's complex. I never doubted that she loved Minoo, right? Like I think Minoo's mom loved her. I don't know if she could always. It seemed to be that boundary when Minoo stopped being a little girl and was all of a sudden a woman, that that's when the complexity really ramped up
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
between the two of them, right? She just, and the expectation she had from Minoo as a woman that Minoo couldn't herself.
yeah, live up to. And
Yeah.
I think a little bit later on in the book, it's not really given a deep exploration because her mother is not open to deep exploration,
No.
but her mother does say something to Minu, relates a story from her past that I think might explain a little bit about why she is the way she is, and what
Mhm.
that she is trying to protect Minu from an outcome, and doing a very poor job of it. Like it's not that, but she was trying to protect her daughter, and she just failed spectacularly, and probably should have gone about it a different way. But she lacks the tools and resources to do anything more than Minu does, and she lacks the introspection. So I mean, part of this is cultural, but I'm really not trying to make broad sweeping generalizations about Iranian woman. Hence Kala. Kala is a
Mhm.
completely, all of us, no matter where we're from or who we are, we're not the same as the person sitting beside us. It's you can't. I'm really always trying to battle against the monolith.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, here's a phrase that you used in the book. that I think I've heard you use it before. I don't know if it was in one of our conversations, like in previous book chats that we've had. If I had the pleasure, I think it was last summer, of seeing you in person. Actually, a couple times I've seen you in person, actually, for book events and stuff. Pockets of joy. I'm
Mm.
like attributing this to you because I love that phrase.
Yeah, I have said it before. I don't
Hmm.
know if I've ever written it. Maybe I have. I talk about joy pockets a lot.
Yes,
I think I talked about it at Grit Lit.
that's it.
If you were around.
That's it.
Yeah, I was we
Yeah,
were talking, I was on a panel about uh,
yeah.
climate change and eco literature and finding joy pockets. Yeah, I mean, I live with various comorbid mental illnesses. I'm an addict who's about a decade sober. I think, you know, and I mean, I'm just also a human living in this dumpster fire of a world. And I think it's really important to find our joy pockets, and that these are just little spots of joy in our lives that make make it worth it.
Mhm.
And because there is going to be darkness, and I don't want to Disneyfy anything. So I love joy pockets. I live for joy pockets. I mean, I find them anywhere I can, like whether it's like a stick of black licorice
Yeah.
or the chickadees, like walking outside and hearing chickadees, or getting a quick snuggle from one of my kids, holding my kids' hands, like any of them, any of the four of them. Whenever one of my kids holds my hand without me having to beg,
Mhm.
or take their hand, there's a joy pocket. Like all of these things are wonderful, and I think that I want to focus on them, and I didn't really want to focus on trauma. I didn't want this to be a book. I mean, it is a book about traumatic things that have happened, but I didn't want it to be trauma porn. I wanted to talk about um oh, I think I wrote it something to the effect of, these isn't about the things that kill you or make you stronger, but just the things that make you who you are.
Yeah.
That not everything has to be the result of some massive traumatic event. I mean, often it's like a combination of things. Obviously, Minoo has had some very, like a teenage pregnancy and then being separated from her
Yeah.
baby is a lot. But it's there's also been a lot of joy in her life and a lot of happiness, and I wanted to like take all of it together and not try to make it into a story that's just going to have people like weeping like the whole way through. And I wanted absurdity, and I mean, I think absurdity is one of my greatest joys. Like laughing about things that are so funny and absurd. Like the comment sections on TikTok videos. I swear that some of our best comedians on the planet are working their magic there. I mean, my kids always say to me that they can tell that I'm done work and taking a break if they hear what they call the mum cackle from downstairs, and it's usually because I'm in the comment section of a TikTok video, and when I send them the video, they know I don't want them to watch the video. I want them to read the genius work being done in the comments.
That is me. I almost think, is would you consider Ecology Paul as like a pocket of joy for
Yeah.
Minu,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the puppet's a pocket of joy for me. I did a photo shoot with the puppet recently, and the photographer said to me, because I don't like having my photo taken. I mean, I think that's a lot of people. I'm not special there, but I really don't like having my photo taken, and I didn't want to be doing anything I was being asked to do. Like I was pushing back. I was being sullen and surly and moody about everything. And then as soon as I put on the puppet, I was smiling and happy. And uh, you know, the photographer took this picture when I first put it on, where like the puppet turned its face to me, and we're just smiling at each other. And I was just like, this is a little bit unhinged, because I am very happy when I'm with
Yeah.
the puppet. And Ecology Paul, like Ecology Paul is my soft spot. I really thought when I was writing this novel, because I spoke to this puppet for a year to write this novel, and I am not Minoo. Minoo is, we have very little in common as far as our personalities go. But the puppet I spoke to for a year, at first it was like, okay, this is just about choreography. What I
Yeah.
mean is, how would you go about your day with this thing on your hand? How could you actually function? How should I describe the movements of Minoo? How can I get into the head of this puppet? Well, let's make a puppet and see. So I made a prototype of what would become the puppet in the book, and I spoke to it for a year. And I really thought that Ecology Paul would be a lot harder on Minoo. I expected Ecology Paul to be this place of tough love, like, get your shit together, girl.
Mhm.
And it surprised me because the voice was a lot nicer
Yeah.
and kinder.
You did a great job of, because I could always picture Ecology Paul with Minoo, like whatever she was doing, Paul was there. But also, they were always facing each it sounds like Paul was like this separate entity for me. Like there's a what's popped into my head now, there's a scene where she's driving and Paul's on her hand
Mhm.
and she's pulled over by the police,
Mhm.
which is a stressful situation in and of itself. And the love and the compassion that Paul used to get her through that, even just to be like, would you like me to get the registration out of the glove compartment for her? Like, it was like Paul was there for her, and it was
Mhm.
lovely. So
Yeah.
thank you. Like,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's a point where the puppet's also getting frustrated with her, though. Like,
Well,
it's
yes, true.
doing its best to be like, "Okay, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do this." Like, and just like, let me take care of this for you. But just searching for the glove compartment, can't find where she's put anything. Like her, like just like, oh, she's so disorganized. Like he's getting frustrated as hell
Yeah.
with her, but is also doing it for her.
Yeah.
And I think it's the puppet takes on a very maternal almost quality in
Hmm.
some ways. And I all I had to do was think about, the way I am with my kids. Like when my 8-year-old is like, I'm a big boy, but then he won't even put on his own underwear. And it's
Yeah.
like that kind of exasperated love you have for them. And I think that's what I channeled into Ecology Paul, because it's not like he doesn't get, or the puppet, he, she, they, whatever, it doesn't get frustrated. It's just that the love is going to always course correct any movement towards frustration. It's there's going to be a deep breath and then being like, okay,
Yeah.
let's get through this.
You touched on it right at the beginning about ooh.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
what "oo" means. Can we get a? Because I really love the definition of "oo" and how you play with gender through Paul and through Minoo's, queer identity.
Yeah, so again, "u" is the Farsi genderless pronoun for he and she. So to build on that a little, there is no he or she in Farsi. "U" is just the pronoun for both. It's not like a separate pronoun is created to combine them both. That's it. There is a pronoun for they that's used for plural of so it's not the same thing. So it's Farsi is a beautiful language, and it has a lot of playfulness and drama to it, and it has a lot of agility that English doesn't. So
Mm,
I wanted to use that as a way of bringing in this really interesting facet that the language has of this genderless pronoun. But then, of course, there's also Minoo exploring her sexuality, which is, of course, not the same thing as necessarily gender. It can be, but isn't always. But, and also it used "u" to talk about how there is an element of Ecology Paul and Minoo being conflated here. Uh, so that's why I've had a few people refer to Ecology Paul as a he. Even I do sometimes. Sometimes Sometimes I call puppet an it. I'm always like, there is no wrong answer. It's a puppet.
yeah.
Don't worry about it. Um, it's a very real entity to me, but it's also readers can decide how they want to view the puppet. Um, and then Minoo being not straight, which is something she doesn't really acknowledge and doesn't know what to do with. She's ends up being married to a man who she loves very much, but doesn't know how to interact properly with him either. And Ecology Paul is really the only one who understands what's going on. But Ecology Paul won't even say the word, won't even say it out loud, never acknowledges uh, that Minoo isn't straight, or what Minoo felt for her teenage love Kit. Like, Ecology Paul will narrate how much Minoo adored her and narrate her feelings, but at no point does the puppet actually say, "Hey, we're not straight. Hey, we're queer." Like at no point do those words leave the puppet's mouth, and that for me was an extension of my own experience with queerness because I didn't really acknowledge that I wasn't straight until I was in my mid-30s and had 3 out of 4 of my kids. And I can remember saying to my partner, you know, when it really dawned on me that I'm not straight. Like I've he was just like, "Yeah, I think you're the absolute last person to figure that out." And I, like this, nobody is. I'm not surprised. Your kids are. Nobody cares, and nobody's surprised. It's a big shock to you, I know. But and I thought, God, like, how can something that's so obvious to everyone else be so like repressed to me? And then, of course, I started thinking about the ways that in which, as a woman, you know, there was a bit of like the Iranian cultural expectation. If anyone who's read my first book, my memoir, Fuse, it's going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. Um, of the woman's body being disgusting, women showing any skin or acting a certain way sexually, being whores. So there was an element of that kind of cultural oppression. And I'm going to be very careful here and say that, again, Iran as a culture is different from the Iranian government. So when I'm talking about the culture, I'm talking about the government culture, not, you know, the very, you know, open-minded and liberal people of Iran who exist as well. Again, dismantle the monolith. Like the entire population of Iran is not one thing. But in this case, I was definitely had a very strict religious interpretation of Islam influencing the culture in which I grew up. And there are many ways to interpret Islam. So again, being careful with that too. And I'm not trying to say it's all oppressive. So for Minoo and me, this is a similarity, is that like we don't really, I know I didn't realize because I'd grown up to hate my body so much. Now, of course, in Western culture too, Tara, you and I were talking about this before the show. Like growing up in the 90s and even the 80s, I was a kid in the, like a young kid in the 80s, so I don't really, I'm not going to put it too much there, but in the 90s, like growing up, I mean, we're taught pretty much to hate our bodies all the
Yeah.
time. That you're not thin enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not, in my case, I'm not white enough, I'm not blonde hair, blue eyed enough. Like it was really, it was tough. So I really learned to hate my body and to distrust my body. So it wouldn't have occurred to me to find attractive bodies like mine. So it
Yeah.
wasn't until I got older and I started consciously and unconsciously dismantling these systems of oppression within myself that, you know, it occurred to me looking around, seeing greater representations of what queerness is, that I was like, I am absolutely not straight. Like there were definitely experiences in my younger life that pointed in that direction, which is why nobody was surprised except me. I was writing those experiences off as something else apparently. But you know, but I was just like, yeah, I can completely see in Minoo how somebody who is oppressed enough and isn't in touch with their body and enough wouldn't know and wouldn't acknowledge something like this. Like there's a whole scene where Ew kind of forces Minoo to look at pictures of cervixes because she doesn't know what a cervix looks like and doesn't really understand ovulation. You know, and again, somebody could say, how could you not know? But there's lots of women and people in general, but especially women who just are so ashamed of their bodies. They actually just don't understand how their bodies work.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a little side loop, I guess. I don't know how to say it. Because in your introduction, in addition to, so the Unraveling of Ou was just published.
Mhm.
Just shortly before Ou, you had a poetry chapbook come out, The Blades of Grass Are Dreaming. Tell us about that and poetry. Just go.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to ask about poetry. I was thinking about poetry today. So I consider myself a poet first and foremost. I really had to hustle to get my narrative mind like corralled to write a novel. Poetry is my factory setting. That's where I am naturally. So The Blades of Grass Are Dreaming is a poetry chapbook that was published with Anstruther Press, and it's a great chapbook press. And I'd never done a chapbook before. I'd done a full length collection, and I thought, oh well, I kind of have some poems that are part of a full length collection I'm working on, and I thought, why not just do a chapbook, which is just like
Mm,
a sample size and a amuse bouche of poetry. I think
yeah.
like 14 pages in this case. So that is a collection of poems that are all occasional verse. So occasional verse is simply poetry that celebrates or commemorates an occasion. Very simple.
Yeah.
Arguably, a lot of poetry could be occasional verse. Um, but this one is specifically, and it's part of a larger collection I'm working on. That's an entire collection of occasional verse that explores the passage of time, but specifically through the lens of me, who lives with a kind of obsessive compulsive disorder called existential OCD,
Hmm.
which is an OCD that is consumed by ideas of mortality and time passing and all that stuff. It can be quite debilitating, hence me being an addict for a long time and not being very well. And I am happily medicated now, which has definitely helped me deal with it a bit better and not get lost in these cycles. But I've always been told that I don't have a very solid grasp on time. And I always used to joke it's PST, which is Persian Standard Time. That's why I'm always late for stuff. It's genetic. But you know upon examination, I actually don't understand time very well. Like, I don't have a concept of it. It's a very slippery
Okay.
concept for me, and it's also a very scary concept for me. So I'm very aware of time passing, but I also feel like time accordions a lot. Like,
Mm,
I don't get it.
yeah.
So it's a trying to write the occasional verse is about celebrating passages of time from someone who's terrified of time and mortality and doesn't understand it. So that's what these are. So there's a poem called Existential OCD at the Visitation, which is about my father and I going to a visitation for a very close family friend who I love very much, and trying to like engage with what's going on, but also keep myself away from what's going on.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of stuff like that. So there's you know a poem that I'm working on about the first time I got asked if I wanted the senior discount, which stung a little. And stuff like, so some of them are meant to be like kind of light, and some of
Yeah.
them, because again I use absurdity a lot, and some of them aren't so light. So yeah, that's what the chat book is. The senior discount one isn't in that.
Yeah. We have
I'm
to wait
working
for
on it.
that one.
Go wait for that treasure. Yeah, and so it's poetry is again like what I always revert back to. It's my happy place. Not that I don't like the other stuff as well. I like writing prose as well, but poetry is not a demanding mistress. um,
Mm,
Poetry lets me take my time and breathe, whereas I feel
yeah.
like prose is kind of like intense.
Yeah. Okay. I find that phrase that you just used so interesting for you as a poet to say that it's not a demanding, because I feel like as readers, we sometimes have the opposite view of poetry, that it demands a lot from us and therefore scares us,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I I always just feel, well, two things. As writing a poem, I feel like you cannot, to quote Adele Wiseman again, she's a wonderful poem in her collection, The Dowager Empress, which was published after her passing by Elizabeth Green, and the poem is called "Never Put a Poem Off." And it's about never putting a poem off, because like that flash of verse will just be gone, so just write it down. So I believe that. I believe in like getting poetry out and getting the images out when they come to you. But I also think that poems for me take a long time to finish. What I mean is, like, there's the
Mm,
original draft, which is never the draft people see, and then I feel like to finish a poem for me is like a patient process. Like, things come to me in time, like the cadence and what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to distill, because poetry is language and feeling and thought and experience and everything distilled down to its pearliest little bits. That takes time.
mhm.
That isn't something that can be forced out. Whereas I felt with the novel and even my short story collection, both of which I finished in less than a year, there, like, prose is just something for me that feels far more fluid and spring loaded. Whereas
Okay.
I couldn't while I don't want to put a poem off, I need to get down that flash of verse. Absolutely. That flash of verse is not the whole poem. So to finish a poem, I feel like it needs a lot of room to breathe.
Yeah.
And with prose, I don't feel the same way. Other writers probably have completely different experiences. Now, from the reader perspective, I would say that that pressure, that maybe it's something that we're taught about poetry and we need to stop being taught poetry this way. I think that's like an external pressure, because I don't think that any poem I've ever read has intrinsically made me feel pressured to
Yeah.
feel anything other than what I'm feeling. But I do understand that we're often taught that, oh, what does this poem mean? Which is such a terrible question. I
Yeah.
always like to say, how does this poem make you feel? Which is a completely different question, because there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
So if somebody's like, this poem makes me feel confused, well, there you go. That's that's cool. Like that
Yeah.
confusion, feeling confused or disoriented or unsettled, is a very useful thing to feel, because it tells us a lot about ourselves. And often poets are trying to do those things. And if this poem makes me feel warm and fuzzy, or it makes me feel light and joyful, cool. That's all that matters then.
Yeah.
That's what you want. So I mean, there is no wrong way to feel about a poem. But poems, when you're reading them, I mean, just like writing them, I would say that it demands slowness. So I often won't like sit down. I might sit down and finish a book start to finish in an evening. Very rarely do I do that with a book of poetry, unless it's very prose poems. Then I might be able to do that.
Mhm.
But if it's a book of poetry, like let's say Patrick Grace's Deviant, or Tolu Olorantaba's Unravel, these are books that require you to maybe like snack on a poem or two, and then let that settle, and let it soothe or disrupt or do what it's supposed to do. But poems are not productivity tasks. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I have like books of poetry around my house. My kids joke that I'm like the kid from that movie Signs, where there's water glasses all over the house. They're like, mom's poetry books are like her water glasses
Yeah.
to ward off aliens. But in my case, it's just my anxious thoughts, where I'll just like pick up a book of poems and like just read a poem standing there, and then put it down and walk away and go about my life. I mean, that is how that's like, I don't like being prescriptive about reading or writing advice, but I think that if you struggle with poetry, then perhaps, or getting into it, perhaps like just take the pressure off. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Just read one poem and read it slowly, and use it as an active resistance to this world around us that's telling us we have to move faster and be better and, consume more. No,
Mhm.
consume less, consume
Yeah.
slowly, chill out, read a
Yeah.
poem.
Okay. That's perfect, because that's what I wanted. I'm like, how do we as readers make ourselves more open to poetry? And you just gave it to us. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do the same thing with poetry. I can't zoom through a book. I always just read one or two. The
Mhm.
problem I was having is I was trying to read it during the day, like when I would have my regular reading little sessions in there kind of thing, right? And at that point, I'm always in like a fiction mode usually, or not, and prose, and just want to go with it. I have very recently started reading poetry before bed,
Mhm.
as like, because I can't, I'm always really tired when I get to bed. And soon as I like snuggle in, I'm usually gone in 5 minutes. So I'd get like maybe half a page of my book read, and who cares? I've forgotten what I've read. But I started picking up my like poetry instead, as and one or two poems just before I go to bed.
Perfect.
Flipping lovely. It's
It
so
is.
nice.
Exactly. That's it. I read poetry before bed too, but not bad. What I usually do is I have a some sort of prose on the go, so fiction or nonfiction,
Yeah.
and I read poetry before I do that. So I'll have like my
Okay.
amuse bouche of
Yeah.
of poetry. Like, admittedly though, like last night I was finishing reading Mallory Tater's "Lockers Are for Bearcats Only," which is a book of poetry.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'm just gonna like read a little bit, read a poem or two before I switch over to prose. Because I'm reading uh, Peter S. Beagle's book. Oh my God, Tasman. So, which is fantasy. And I was like, okay, I'll get back to that, but first I'll just read a couple of these poems, because I've been really loving the collection, and I
Yeah.
like finished it. I was
Yeah.
like, but like Mallory's poems are really um, really earnest and loving and engaging, and uh, stylistically they're very clean.
Mm.
So for people who are like new to poetry, it'd be a really good book to start with because it's it's complex. Like making something that clean is a complex, difficult thing to do, but it reads easy. So I always say to people, easy is not simple. Accessible, it's accessible, but it's not simple. It just means that, if you're not someone who has read a lot of poetry and whose mind has been trained to let go. Because I don't think poetry is like training a muscle to become stronger. I think it's training a muscle to relax.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's like, too much hypertension. It's like relax, and when you
Yeah.
relax, the poem will start making sense. Stop trying to force it into something it's not supposed to be. Um, but I think Mallory's poems like can kind of meet your mind wherever it is, and not have to like unprogram yourself as
Yeah.
much as some other poems might, because there's poets like Aisha Sasha John, who's a wonderful poet I admire a lot, and like th- her poems demand you unclench your brain.
Mm.
Whatever you think you're going to get, just push it aside. It's like positively meditation. Like it's a meditative experience to go into these poems and be like, wow, like it's very associative. So if you're trying to be like, this poem means this, you are going to have a very difficult time. But if you can say, this poem made me laugh, this
Yeah.
poem made me feel light, this poem made me feel deeply uncomfortable, it's like, yeah, there you go. You know what the poem means then. Don't
Yeah.
worry. you
Awesome.
know what was what was trying to happen.
Yeah. I started enjoying poetry when I stopped expecting to understand the poem.
Yeah.
Like when I started going, because I remember in high school being, what does this line mean? What does this mean? And that's so
Mhm.
that was what you're trained to do. And couple of years ago when I stopped going, you know what? I don't need to understand every line of the poem. I'm just going to go with it. And that's when I started enjoying it.
Yeah, I think it's really, it's like visual art. Like there
Hmm.
are poems that certainly lend themselves to be able to like pluck out a lesson or meaning, like with the very famous one, Maggie Smith's Good Bones. You know what I mean? Like where it's like the lesson is, you know, um trying to be a better person, trying to be better, trying to create a better world for your kids, or for
Hmm.
not even if you don't have kids, for generations, right? Like so there's a very clear resounding message you can pick out there. So that's like looking at visual art where it's like, oh, this is Raft of the Medusa, this is what's happening here, this is the
Yeah.
story. But then there's like abstract art where you're looking at it and it's like, okay, there is nothing clear, there's no clear visual here, but it makes me feel this.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like there's different kinds of poets, there's different kinds of just like there's different kinds of visual art. There are ones that are a little bit more abstract, and there's ones that are a little bit more narrative.
Hmm.
And so whenever somebody says to me I don't like poetry, it's like that's like saying you don't like music.
Yeah.
Like you may not like this one type of poetry, you may not like this the work that this one poet produces, or that one collection that the poet produced, but that does not mean you don't like poetry. It means try something else, then
Yeah.
look at something else and read something else. And it's, to me, it's wild that because you didn't like one type, especially some of the stuff, like I can remember, like, okay, for the record, I do love Keats got me into poetry, but I understand I'm an anomaly here. Like I read Keats in grade 9 and was like, this guy is writing some bangers, right? Like he's depressed, he's existential, his vibe matched mine, so I was all there. But I can understand why a lot of people wouldn't connect with that,
Hmm.
especially because the language for readers in our day and age is very alienating.
Yeah.
Just like Shakespeare, it's like you need an entire different text just to explain the language that's being used. And most editors have updated the language, and it can still feel pretty alienating sometimes because we don't talk like that anymore.
Hmm.
So I can understand why, if people are introduced to poetry that way, that it might be a little bit like, "Ugh, I don't like poetry." But like it's like, okay, well, there are contemporary poets too.
Yeah.
Maybe try something. If nothing else, like listen to some spoken word. Spoken word artists
Oh,
are
I
doing
love spoken word.
deaf poetry
Yeah.
jam. Like friggin' pull up those bangers on YouTube and like
Yeah.
listen to these people work their magic. I mean, page poets and spoken word poets. There is crossover. There are definitely people who do both really really well. But it's a different kind of like
Yeah.
there's performance and then there's page, and some people like Charlie Petch, they do both things really, really beautifully. And I think, there's someone who's done the transition. I prefer not to perform my poems whenever possible. I'm gonna like, no, I'm gonna ruin them. Don't make me read them. Um, but I think, like, okay, so you don't like one kind, find another. There's a whole wonderful world of poetry out
Yeah.
there. When people tell me I don't like poetry, I'm like, oh my god, you're missing. Like, I'm not angry. I just feel sorry for you because
Yeah.
you're missing such beauty.
Well, we're going to reframe it with how does the poem make me feel?
How does the
And go
poem
with
make you
yeah.
feel, Aaron? However it makes you
Yeah.
feel is correct.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You started, and I'm going to get you to continue because I like to end each little chat by adding to my TBR.
Okay.
So let us know, what are some of your favorite books that you've read recently? What are you currently reading? We heard a little bit about that, but
Yeah.
add to our list.
Yeah, so Whitney French's Syncopation, which is a
Okay.
novel in verse. So talk about doing something
Mm,
fantastic. It's like set in a dystopian future. It's a queer love story. It's just beautiful. It
nice.
is so beautiful. It's just released with Walzac and Wynne February of this year,
Oh, yeah.
2026. So beautiful, beautiful. I highly recommend that. And it is it's a poem that is narrative. Again, it's a novel, but it's in verse. So it is going somewhere. It is doing something, and it is asking you to definitely unpin your brain from
Mm,
whatever expectation it has going in. And you will be handsomely rewarded if you can manage to do that.
awesome.
So I really recommend it. Another one that I've read recently that I really loved was K.R. Wilson's Stan on Guard, which is the sequel for Call Me Stan, which is like, he is probably one of my top three. Stan is one of my top three anti-heroes in history.
Oh,
So
really?
he is an immortal. Well, technically, he can die. He just hasn't figured out how to do it yet. But he lives throughout the centuries, and it's following him on his uh, adventures and misadventures. It's a really highly entertaining read with a literary fiction vibe to it. And K.R. Wilson is a Toronto author, and he's just phenomenal. Such a smart, clever writer. So I absolutely recommend that book. I talked about Mallory Tater's Lockers
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
Bearcats Only, which also deals with themes of like girlhood friendship and ending the stigma of suicide. So I recommend that. That was really beautiful. I loved Natalie Lim's Elegy for Opportunity, which is
Okay.
it's a poetry collection too. These are really great places to start if you're looking for poems to start with. Elegy for Opportunity is also highly accessible but not simple. The being that clear and just that immersive is a very difficult thing to do with very sparse words. So I recommend that as well. I'm currently, I'm reading Peter S. Beagle. I'm going to read everything Peter S. Beagle has ever written. I'm trying to get him on one of my shows, but he's a busy guy, and his lawyer's being very nice to me and entertaining
Mhm.
me. But I may have to just like lay off soon. Um, Entertaining me, not saying he's going to be on my show, but just talking about how much we love the books together. She's the one who,
Yeah.
Laura's the one who recommended I read the one I'm reading now, Tasman, which I'm really enjoying. So Peter S. Beagle, for people who have not heard of him, I think he is best known for The Last Unicorn. He wrote that. So
Okay.
that's been really fun. I'm reading a bunch of Ali Hazelwood. So this is like
Oh,
a,
yeah.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
just finished reading Bride and Mate. So this is like a completely different spectrum here, but
Mm-hmm.
I read anything.
Yeah.
So that was those were very entertaining books, very fast paced, entertaining reads. That little streak of smut
Yep.
through it as well. And then I'm also reading Rachel Pham's Restaurant Kid, which is about growing up in with her parents owning a restaurant as an Asian child
Mm-hmm.
in rural Canada. And I love hearing stories about minorities. Ugh, I gotta find a better way to say that. I like, as someone who is not white, whenever someone says minority,
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like personally offended by that. About people who are not white living in rural areas, because
Yeah.
I was born in Toronto, but I did a lot of growing up in a rural area, and people are always like surprised we're out here too. We're not just in cities. So that's turning out to be like such a wonderful read. I'm loving that. And then I'm gonna just mention one more, and it's Alison Gadsby's short stories. Breathing is how some people stay alive.
Yeah.
They're so freaking deeply beautiful and
Um,
unsettling. Like, I was just like,
Hollay, I just finished this past weekend.
yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, like the stories
Amazing.
about the one with the forms, like the robot humans, the androids.
Yes.
Oh my god. Like I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh, like this is so wonderfully,
Yeah.
thrillingly unsettling that like
Yeah.
the one with the teacher who comes to live with them and then the father doesn't want her and then he kind of falls in love with the form and the daughter. Oh my god, like that just like completely blew my mind. I
Yeah.
love those
When
stories.
I finished that particular story, I walked into the other room and I told my husband, I'm like, you're not really going to want to listen to me right now, but I have to tell you about this story. And
Yeah.
I told him, I'm like, this blood, I'm like, I had to tell him, I'm like, and this is what happened at the end.
Yeah, and this is Allison's debut book, right? Like, so just hit it out of the park. Like,
Yeah, she did.
yeah, I'm so deeply impressed with those stories. So, and so yeah, and then I'll just also mention short stories because I really want to give short fiction some love.
Mhm.
Weird Babies by Jacqueline DeForge, which is a collection
Okay.
of short stories coming out with Gordon Hill Press in April, and of course I have an advance copy. That's one of the perks of doing what we
Mhm.
do is that we
Yep.
get advance copies. But it's really fantastic, and it's like adorable and macabre at times too. It's about the weird babies in us all,
Okay.
right? That vulnerable, soft spots of ourselves. So I really recommend that gorgeous collection too. So I think I've done all genres. I mean,
That's awesome.
I could keep going forever, you know
Yeah.
that, but these are the ones I've read most recently.
No, I think that is amazing, and we can all add to our lists, and thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. People, please check out Hollay on Instagram under Ghadery. Also check out your publicist accounts, River Street Writes,
Yes.
because almost every single book that you've recommended to us has been a banger. Like it's just so please, if anyone is looking to broaden your Canadian authors, books, whatever, River Street Writes is a great place to look for recommendations.
Thank you so much. We carefully and lovingly curate every single book we talk
We
about
really
there.
do.
We read every single book before we recommend it. Like we're not just blindly going in and
Yeah.
throwing books around. We really do love them. And, you know, Canadian published Canadian literature
Hmm.
is some of the best on the planet. And
Yeah.
I think we need to stop thinking that because something is local to us, whether that's a national local or
Hmm.
even just in our communities, like in our actual communities, like there are wonderful people, artists, and there's talent all around us. And I'm a big, big believer in giving people their flowers right away.
Yeah. Yeah. And Canadian lit is so much more than it was when I was first introduced to it in the 70s and 80s and 90s. We've got to stop thinking about the canon of Canadian lit, which is amazing. That's how I got into Canadian lit, is through the canon. But we've expanded. It's so
Yeah,
much
like all
more.
due respect to the people who built it up, but
Yeah.
not but all due respect to them. And
Yes.
there are a lot of other wonderful people. And I also
Yeah.
I can't believe I forgot to mention the dialogues. Everybody I because there's Canadian literature and then there's indigenous literature and sometimes depending on the person they'll find conflating the two, but I do have to mention there are like a lot of wonderful indigenous stories.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
dialogues by Arnett Garnet Ruffo is a beautiful kind of hybrid poem slash nonfiction piece about Francis Pegamabo, who
Mhm.
was the famous indigenous World War II sniper. So
Oh, okay.
it's a
I'm not
really
familiar
beautiful
with
read.
that one. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I had to throw that in because I just kicked myself in the butt and I couldn't believe I didn't mention any of the really knockout indigenous writers we
Oh,
represent.
yeah.
A terrible oversight of mine.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, get reading and happy reading. Thank you, Hollay.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.